December 19, 1968. In Vietnam's Long Hai Mountains, a decorated American Green Beret witnessed something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Not because it was loud, not because it was massive, but because it was silent. Staff Sergeant Michael James Connolly, U.S. Army Special Forces, 5th Special Forces Group, 31 years old, 2 previous tours, multiple awards for valor. A veteran of missions that never made it into public records. Connolly had seen the worst that war can do, and he believed he was prepared for anything. That morning proved him wrong. The joint patrol was Connolly's idea. He'd heard the rumors in Special Forces camps, stories about Australian SAS teams operating out of Nui Dat, 5-man patrols producing results that didn't make sense on paper, men who moved like ghosts, trackers who could follow the faintest trace across miles of jungle. Connolly dismissed it as exaggeration, the kind of legend that grows whenever elite units operate near each other. But those stories weren't myths. They were warnings. By late 1968, the men of 2nd Squadron, Australian Special Air Service Regiment, had been operating in Phuoc Tuy province for nearly 3 years. They arrived as a reconnaissance unit, trained in long-range patrol and surveillance. But the jungle changed them. So did the enemy, and the influence of Aboriginal trackers shaped them into something different. The Australians did not measure success in explosions or airstrikes. They measured it in patience, discipline, and a psychological pressure that made an enemy feel watched even when no one was visible. The patrol commander was Sergeant Terran Michael Walsh, call sign Blackbird, a builder's son from Melbourne, 29 years old. To the Viet Cong, Walsh had another name, the Jungle Ghost. A bounty followed him, and stories about him were told to frighten new recruits. Connolly expected a tough soldier. What he met felt colder than that. Not cruel, not loud, just certain. Walsh accepted Connolly's presence with visible reluctance. The Australians had become skeptical of American jungle tactics. Too loud, too predictable, too destructive. They had watched units move through dense terrain like a marching band, heard radio chatter that ruined secrecy, and seen operations that created more resentment than results. America had overwhelming firepower, but what it often lacked in the jungle was craft, and craft was everything. The patrol stepped off before dawn on December 17th, single file through the rubber plantation, then into the jungle. Connolly had been on countless patrols, but he had never moved like this. No snapped twigs, no clinking gear, no careless movement. The Australians flowed through vegetation like water. Then Walsh did something that stunned him. He modified his boots, cutting the sole to erase recognizable prints, improve ground feel, and reduce noise. The others did the same without discussion. It wasn't a trick, it was a mindset. Every detail mattered. Weapons were wrapped to reduce reflection and sound. Metal buckles were replaced or padded. Nothing unnecessary was carried. They stripped themselves down to function. At the front moved Lance Corporal William Mundine, an Aboriginal tracker. Calm, patient, focused. Mundine read the jungle like a living document. Disturbances in vegetation, footprints days old, the number of men in a group, their direction, how fast they moved, how alert they likely were. America had aircraft, sensors, and surveillance, but it didn't have this, not human reading of the land itself. By the morning of December 19th, the patrol had covered roughly 17 kilometers through brutal terrain. They moved mostly at night and hid through the day. They avoided contact instead of forcing it. Then Mundine detected signs of a larger presence ahead. A Viet Cong rest station, a semi-permanent stop where rotating units resupplied and recovered. Dozens of personnel, a guarded perimeter. Walsh listened to the estimate and showed no surprise. Then he smiled. Connolly expected a call for support, artillery, airstrikes, reinforcements. Walsh asked for none of it. Instead, he outlined a plan built on time and silence. The goal wasn't just to win a firefight, it was to collapse the enemy's confidence before the first shot was fired. They would wait for full darkness, work the perimeter carefully, and by morning leave a message that said one thing clearly: you are not safe here. As night fell, Connolly stayed back with Mundine at a distant observation point. Walsh and the others disappeared into the dark. Over the next hours, something unsettling happened. The perimeter communication began to fail, not with gunfire, not with explosions, just silence spreading from one position to another. Inside the camp, the enemy commander faced a problem he couldn't explain, a defensive ring going quiet without visible contact. So he did what most leaders would do in that moment. He pulled his sentries inward and tightened security close to the camp. A rational response, and exactly what Walsh had predicted. Connolly didn't sleep. Mundine watched the night with an unreadable calm. At one point, in a whisper, he said a single word that Connolly would never forget: hunt. At first light on December 20th, the camp stirred. The commander stepped out to assess the perimeter, and what he saw shook him. The outer security line had been compromised, and a message had been left behind. Not a speech, not a leaflet, a demonstration, a reminder that someone had been among them during the night, unseen, untouched, and in control. To the survivors, it didn't feel like an attack. It felt like being watched by something they couldn't fight. Then the second phase began. Shots rang out from positions already established close in, precise, controlled, targets chosen for maximum disruption. In moments, leadership and communication were neutralized. The camp fell into confusion. Some men fired blindly, some ran, some tried to regroup. It didn't matter. The engagement was short, the outcome decisive, and the Australians moved with the cold efficiency of men doing a job they had rehearsed in their minds 100 times. Afterwards, Walsh moved through the camp, collecting intelligence, maps, documents, anything that could explain movement routes and supply lines. But he also handled personal items with a strange precision, documenting them and returning them exactly where they had been. Another message: we were here, we saw everything, we left what mattered to you, just to prove we could. Then Walsh approached Connolly with a request, a photo, documentation for an internal report. Connolly refused, not with a speech, not with a lecture, just a hard, instinctive no, and he walked away. Because Connolly understood something in that moment. There were places you could go in war that you might never come back from the same. He could respect what the Australians did. He could recognize its effectiveness, but he didn't want to become it. The patrol returned to base days later. Connolly filed reports through official channels. Those reports were classified and never publicly released. He added one request: no more joint operations with the Australian SAS. In the months that followed, intelligence suggested a shift. Enemy movement patterns changed, routes were avoided, rumors spread, morale weakened. A single operation by a tiny patrol produced effects that massive conventional operations often struggled to achieve, not with firepower, through fear and uncertainty. The Americans had immense resources, air power, artillery, technology, but the Australians had something different, a philosophy. They didn't just fight the enemy, they pressured the enemy's mind. They made safety feel like a lie, and that's the unsettling part. It worked. But it demanded something from the men who practiced it, a willingness to live inside silence, a willingness to become a hunter. Connolly could not cross that line. Connolly lived for decades after Vietnam, still carrying that mourning in the long high mountains. Walsh returned to civilian life and spoke rarely about the war. Years later, Connolly's family found a handwritten note describing what he had witnessed, preserved not as a trophy, but as a warning. Because some stories don't survive to inspire, they survive to disturb, to remind us that war doesn't just test weapons, it tests the human mind. And sometimes the most frightening victories are the quiet ones. If this story disturbed you, it's because it's real history that most people never hear about. If you want more documentary-style war stories, hidden operations, and the moments that changed soldiers forever, subscribe now and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next episode. And please share this video with someone who loves history and military stories. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think fear is a weapon, or does it cross a line? Like the video, share it, and I'll see you in the next one.